All right, so now that we've looked at how to draw a box plot, let's go ahead and look at an example of how to read an existing box plot. So here I have two box plots on the same plot that show the test scores for different biology classes. So we have the first period biology class and the test scores that they scored, and then we have the second period biology class and their test scores on the same exam. So I'm going to look just really quickly at the first period biology class only. So if I go ahead and annotate this, this is our minimum, this is Q1, this is Q2, this is Q3, and this is the maximum. We don't have any outliers in this, or at least we don't have them labeled if there is an outlier. So now, from the minimum to Q1, this whisker that we see here, this whisker contains 25% of the data. And then from Q1 to Q2, this first chunk of our box plot, this is another 25% of our data. Q2 to Q3, 25% of the data is in here. And Q3 to the maximum, that's another 25% of the data. So if the first period class consisted of 20 students, that means 4 students scored between a 60 and a 75. That's the minimum to Q1. 4 students scored between 75 and 80. 4 students scored between 80 and 90. And 4 students scored between 90 and 97.5-ish. I'm kind of having to approximate what the max is. I think that's about 97.5. Okay, so that's one thing that we know we can look at when we're looking at a box plot, is remembering that Q1, Q2, and Q3 split our data set into 4 equally sized sections. So when we're looking at a box plot, the 2 whiskers and the 2 sections in the box are 25% of the data. So now let's go ahead and look at some of the questions we have for these box plots. So the first question is asking which class had a higher median. So recall the median is the same thing as Q2. So here I can see that first period had a median value of 80. And then if I look at second period, the median is the line in the middle of the box. So second period had a median of 85. So the second period class had the higher median. Which class had the larger range in their scores? So recall the range is the maximum minus the minimum. So the maximum for the first period class was, what did we approximate that? 97.5. And their minimum score was a 60. So that's a range of 37.5. The second period class had a maximum value of 95 and a minimum value of 70. So 95 minus 70 is 25. So the first period class has the larger range. And you can see that on the box plot because the box plot for first period is longer than the box plot for second period. Which class has the larger IQR? That should say larger IQR. So again, we're looking at the range, but now we're looking at the range of just the box part. So if I'm looking at just the pictures, so we're looking at the box piece. This is Q1 to Q3. This is Q1 to Q3. I would say that first period also has the larger IQR, but I'm going to go ahead and calculate that just to be sure. So it looks to me like first period has a Q3 value of 90 and a Q1 value of 75. So that is a range of not 25, 15. Sorry. That's a range of 15. And then second period, their Q3 value is a little bit more than 90. So maybe 91. It's okay to kind of approximate these when it doesn't fall exactly on that spot. And then their Q1 appears to be 80. So that's a range of 11. So again, the first period class had the larger IQR. And then the last question that we're going to answer right now with these two box plots is looking at what percent of students in each class scored above an 80. So I'm going to come back up to my box plot. I'm going to do just a little bit of erasing. Here we go. And we're looking at the value for 80. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line up here. So the first period class had a median value of 80. So that means 50% of the students scored above an 80. Because you have the 25% from Q2 to Q3 and the 25% from Q3 to the max. And then the second period class, it looks like their Q1 value was 80. So then we have 3 sections of the box plot above the 80 from Q1 all the way to the maximum for the second period class. So that means 75% of the students scored above an 80 in the second period class. So the second period class, this isn't actually part of the question, but I'm going to write this down, has more students scoring an 80 or higher than the first period class. So those are a couple of things we can look for on box plots. If there were an outlier value, that would be marked with an asterisk or a dot, and that would have then changed our calculation of the range. So we want to make sure if there are box plots on our, if there are outliers in the box plot that we're looking at, that we keep that in mind when we're calculating the range. So there's an example of how to read a